Hey, Qian,
We're gonna go straight up,
right?
but this is expensive. But I know you got enough to cover the
Look at that,
cost.
see? Now you're gonna start.
I wouldn't do it with anybody.
Now you're gonna start spreading rumors. Don't believe all those internet videos, see?
Now just hit this and go up. Go up. Go up, go up. Straight up. Yeah,
Hey,
give
wanna
it
go
some.
higher?
Yeah. Let's go.
Let's land it.
No, let's go have a conversation. We'll leave it up in the sky and go talk about important stuff.
Now you're scaring me.
All right.
Huh?
Yeah, let's go. Premier, thank you for coming. I mean, it's not every day that you see a head of state sitting off in a park on a Bermuda day. So I take this as a privilege to be able to sit with you and talk about some important things.
No problem. I think that one thing in Bermuda is that we underappreciate sometimes what we have. And to be able to come to a space like this, with a beautiful day, saw Coach Leia up there, flying a kite with his daughter, just decided to come out, him and his wife, and stood off. It's just lovely.
And as you just saw, when we put the drone up, I feel like this location, it really shows the whole of Bermuda. It's like this place, when I look at it from the air, it's like a point that everybody connects to.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the vibe for this conversation. We're gonna be talking about some economics, some infrastructure, and protecting our environment. And economics, we'll start with that, is actually one of the only courses when I was in university that I failed.
Really?
The first time around. I had a thing where if I was really interested in something, I would do well in it. I'm still like that. But at that time, I guess it just didn't fascinate me. And now I can't get enough of it. So
That's interesting. I mean, for me, when I went to university, I actually started in political science.
Okay.
And that's what I went to university for. But I changed that after a year. One of my favorite courses I actually took was economics.
Okay.
Yeah, and I ended up changing my major to finance and information systems going away. But I enjoyed it.
Okay. Well, economics it is to start off. And let's set the table, because you just recently put out the budget for the year ahead. What sort of, in the grand scheme of things, did you consider when it came to putting that together? I mean, right now we're in a period of high inflation. People are really struggling with the day-to-day. There are rumors that we could be on the cusp of a recession.
Well, when I looked at the budget and looked at where we were, I mean, Bermuda's in a far stronger financial position than we expected than what we'll be 2 years ago. And that's mainly due to the significant growth that we've seen in the international business sector and a slower than desired tourism recovery, but still that is supporting the government's finances overall.
Yeah.
And when you speak about inflation, certainly, which we're in a period of high global inflation, which is certainly impacting most families in the country, but what you'll see that impact is mostly on those persons in the middle to lower end of the income bracket, where more of their money is spent on things such as food. And those are the things that are most critical. And so in looking at the budget, it was how can we provide relief to as many persons as possible? Because one of the things that I firmly believe is that we need to have a fairer system of taxation. That was where the Progressive Labor Party was prior to our election in 2017. And that's where we continue. And in this budget, we were able to reduce payroll taxes for all businesses in the country. No business will pay more payroll taxes. 86% of businesses are actually going to be paying less payroll taxes next year. That supports them. You're welcome. And in addition to that, it is 86% of the workers in this country will pay less payroll tax this year. And so when you come to the figures of saying everyone who's making $132,000 or less will pay less taxes, I mean, that's where we are, because persons on the lower scale who are going to see a significant reduction in their tax burden, up to 66%, it is to make sure that you can support their purchasing power, support and make sure they have a little bit of extra money when things are getting a little bit more expensive. And so that's the vision of which it takes. People always say that, it's not enough. I can understand that perspective, but from an overall country budget, we have to look at providing the most relief we can to the widest amount of people we can in the simplest fashion. And that's the way in which we fashioned this budget. But there's another important thing, and it's about a budget for growth.
Yeah.
Because we, as Bermudians, have to have confidence in our country's future. Externally, people have confidence in Bermuda. That's why we continue to see inward investment. That's why we continue to see growth in international business. That's the core. And so in order for us to be successful to grow into the future, we also have to invest in ourselves. And that's why we're talking about the investments in infrastructure and the investments in education and the investments in things to support the environment as well.
I'm gonna give the household analogy because I'm sure most people, especially people like myself who have a family, we think about budget. So one way to balance a household budget, you spend less. Or you try to make more. So that could be getting a second or third or fourth job. It could be starting a business. Could be maybe thinking about investments and stuff like that. But when I think about a government, it's like your only way of making more money is by taxes, right? That's primarily what you get your income from. And so obviously you have to broaden your tax base. We have a lot of eggs in the international business basket. Tourism is starting to pick up. I actually, I was walking around town just yesterday and I was like, wow, it's a lot of people. It looked very busy. So in an effort to grow, I see you've got the SDO that just came out finally for the Fairmont Southampton, which looks like could be 20 years of jobs in development. You've got recently released plans for Morgan's Point, stuff like that. So can you shed some light on all of those things?
So let me ask you a question.
Sure.
I'm gonna throw it back to you.
Okay.
What in your view is the most important issue facing Bermudians today? It's an easy answer. It's not a trick question.
Jobs, finances.
Well, I'm gonna answer the question for you. Cost of living and cost of doing business.
Ask me again.
I will. What do you think?
Cost of living.
And so from that perspective, I think that colors everything of which we do. And so cost of living is cost of doing business, but it's also the cost of taxes. And so the philosophy of which we have to approach things when we talk about broadening the tax base is about making sure that there are more persons that are able to pay taxes in the country. That is where we go to growth of jobs in the economy, which provides more opportunity for more persons to be working and to be contributing to government coffers. But the other way to make sure you do that, and it's a delicate balance, is to make sure that while you can keep taxes where they are, right?
Nobody wants to pay more.
What I'm saying, you can keep taxes where they are. Well, there's one thing which you will see. This government has been very good at not increasing the tax burden on the broad base of persons. Yes, the high earners did get a tax increase in this budget, but the vast majority of persons are paying less taxes. And if you even look at the statistics of people who are in the median income bracket, which is, the absolute middle, which is about $66,000 a year, over the time we've been in office, those persons have paid $5,000 less in taxes. So we have a record of making sure that we are reducing the tax burden of the working class. When we talk about broadening the tax base, this is also about making sure that we can grow the economy. And you grow the economy by reducing taxes as well, which makes investment more productive, which makes people more willing to invest, to go ahead and expand. When you do expand, you can further reduce the tax rate. I'm not of the view that we should keep the tax rate where we are to build up large surpluses to reduce the debt faster. I believe that we should maintain our budget targets, but what we want to do is to have more and more and more growth to broaden the tax base. And why is that important? It's important for costs of living. In Bermuda, whether it's telephone companies, whether it's supermarkets, whether it's large investments, they have to invest in fixed assets. If there are more customers that they can sell those items to, that means the cost overall will reduce for everyone. And that's what we're trying to get. More persons living and working in an economy can lead to reduction of costs of living and the cost of everyday goods and services. You look at Belco. Belco is a regulated entity. They cannot set their prices. Their prices are set by the regulatory authority. If they have 60,000 persons who are consuming their services, they have one price. But if they have 70,000 people who are consuming their services, that means that they're making more revenue. Their profits are capped, and that means that the prices go down for everyone. That is the broad view, and that's why I'm so committed, and the government is committed to making sure that we secure additional investments and growth in the economy that will grow the number of jobs on island, which will lead to the key point of reduction of pressures on costs.
All right, so top of the list.
I'm sorry, and the same thing applies to health insurance.
Yeah.
Because we know how much health insurance kills us. If you have more persons paying into the pool, that means that you have lower costs across the board for everyone. And that's why it's so important that we are focused on growth and development.
Okay, so let it stick. More people, lower cost of living.
Absolutely.
Basic. 101. All right, so let's go to infrastructure. So I see that this year will be the largest capital expenditure on infrastructure in 13 years. Is that correct?
It is, yeah. I think the last time we had a budget this high was, I want to call it 2009, 2010.
Okay. And maintenance is important. You know, if you don't maintain a house, you spend way more when you have to actually fix something that breaks. So you've got, I think, the incinerator that needs some maintenance. You've got the roads. Premier, the roads. The roads are like, I'm gonna look after, especially after it rains hard, the potholes and stuff like that. So obviously the roads are on that list, right?
Absolutely.
Yes?
Yes.
And also you've got a massive, before I get to that, the bridge in St. George's. I live in St. George's, so I see that that's getting, worked on. And then you've got the massive undertaking of school refurbishments. So you're preparing to phase out the middle schools and implement parish primaries and signature schools. Is that the bulk of the list of what we're talking about when it comes to infrastructure?
Well, yes. I mean, that's this year. Remember, infrastructure is something that is often covered over multiple years. And we need to make sure that we invest for growth. So let me start with where you were on roads. Roads are a challenge, but let me put it into context. Over the last 4 to 5 years, we have made significant investments in this country's infrastructure. When we're talking about running water lines throughout the country, sewer lines throughout the country, this is for the future, because right now we're not, moving sewage in certain places. Sewage lines throughout the country, telecommunications lines upgrade, moving electricity transmission underground. And all of that road digging and all of those things cause disruption. And the Minister of Public Works has said that, you have to lay the first thing, wait a while, and then lay the second for it to stick for a long time.
Right.
What we are doing is inconvenient right now, especially inconvenient for the motoring public and others, coming out of certain places, lights up.
Certain places, every place.
Any place.
Yeah.
But the thing is that is a sign of growth and development.
Yeah.
And that's important, and I think it's important that we recognize it, that yes, it is inconvenient now,
but it's necessary.
But the benefits pay off into the future. The benefits pay off after a hurricane when your electricity comes back faster. The benefits pay off when, you have less, you're treating sewage better. You have more access to water in the future in certain places and where you may or may not live. I mean, and you're talking about St. George's. St. George's is the first place that is going to have water lines that are running throughout an entire space and sewage lines that are running throughout an entire space, provide for the capacity for additional growth and development.
Yeah.
But if we talk about the longer term, because I think it's important we talk about this year, what we have in $95 million set aside for capital. A lot of that is to do with affordable housing, education, which you spoke about, Tynes Bay. But as we go on into the future, in the next few years, there's also the investments in which we have to worry about supporting our local farmers with a rebuilding of the agricultural center, which is slated to cost $10 million, which will allow more storage of locally grown food. So there could be more stuff there because that agricultural center is well old. Then we're talking about, as you said, the refurbishment and rebuilding of schools, which is critical because what we are doing with education reform is about the future. I'm a representative of the people. I run the government, but I'm not going to be here forever. But the plans that we are putting in place are to make sure that we set the country up for success in the future. There's an interesting projection that was made. I'm not going to call it statistic, I'm going to call it projection. And they basically says 2/3 of the jobs that your 2-year-old will have when she's an adult haven't been invented yet.
Interesting.
And so our education system needs to match the fact that innovation is going to happen at a far more rapid rate. And that means that we need to have facilities that prepare both primary school students and signature school students to be able to cope in that area.
Yeah.
And if you look at all the work which we've done already, and this is on the capital investment side, when we're talking about the fact that all of our students now have school computers in school, all of our schools have high-speed internet, there's more and more technology that's being put into schools, a better technology curriculum. If we look at it from the perspective of how are we preparing persons for the future, and if we even look at the 2 signature schools we're starting this year, one being, parish primary schools, one being Francis Patton, one being Purvis. The amount of money in this budget is to make sure that we're not just slapping on a coat of paint.
Yeah.
That we're not just, that it's the same furniture that you had last year, but it's a new curriculum. We are demonstrating what the future of education looks like. And this is one of the things where it almost goes back to the start, where we underappreciate what we have here in Bermuda. Bermuda's education reform effort is being studied globally, has been celebrated globally because it is incredibly ambitious when we're talking about preparing a workforce for the future of work. And I think that it's those things that have to be in context. But you have to put your money where your mouth is. And that is the reason why we are determined to invest heavily, and we are determined to build new schools.
Now I have to ask this question. If I don't ask this question, I can't go home for forever. I was at the educational reform meeting, and I just want to say hats off to the government officials that were there, because it was not a easy crowd, to say the least. And I am of the view that, and I'll just state, I'm the vice president of a PTA for my daughter's school, and I'm also a parent. You're also a parent as well. That it is incredibly important for both the government as a stakeholder, teachers, principals, students, and parents to all be on the same page when it comes to this reform. And just an observation, I just felt like within that room, there just wasn't that connection, the buy-in, and the beneficiaries of us getting it right or wrong, ultimately is our kids, and we can't get it wrong. And so, whilst the plan seems like it's well in motion, a lot of people feel like they didn't really have enough of a voice, enough consultation into what's going forward. And so I just want to ask your view. Is everything set in stone, or is the government still willing to listen and have that feedback and also improve, that relationship? Because we, all of our stakeholders, I feel, have to get it right. And nobody has all of the answers.
Let me pick 2 things out of your question.
Yeah.
The first thing I'll say is that everyone has to be on the same page. The challenge with governance is you have to recognize at the beginning that that's never going to be possible. Whether or not there's a country of 65,000, a caucus of 30, a cabinet of 12, no one is ever going to agree on the same points of view of everything.
Right.
And so from a governance perspective, it's important that we get that. And what it is to find out what is the best solution that can work the best, that can have the largest amount of buy-in. The second thing which you said is whether or not it's set in stone. And I think it's important to note that the meetings that are taking place are consultation meetings. That is what it is for. It is for people to put together proposals, to share those proposals, to gather feedback. If you would have seen over the last history of the last 4 to 5 years that we've been engaged in this reform effort, there have been proposals that have been put out, feedback that has come, proposals that have been adjusted and put back, because that is precisely what it is that we are trying to generate. And there's been a lot of work that has gone into that aspect. The one thing that I would say is that for me, it is good to for people to be involved, for people to be passionate, because one of the things that we've been challenged with thus far is that people get excited over, the locations of their educational institutions, but haven't been as excited in all of the other work that is taking place in education reform, whether it's revised curriculum, whether it is how we're going to start delivering education or how we're going to change the delivery. And so my thing is for parents to be involved, because that's what this is about. The Learning First program that has been taking place over the last 3 years has had a lot of involvement, but more involvement is necessary. This is not the first time these plans have been put out. There's been numerous things that have been put out, and they want people to continue to be involved. So the answer to your question is that is the aim and objective, to make sure we get the large amount of buy-in. And that's why I think the ministry has done a good job in continuing to reach out, to solicit feedback, to consider alternatives, and then to put things forward in its final form, which can generate the most buy-in.
Okay, all right. And finally, the environment. So I see things like sea-based wave energy, a farm that could potentially power 10% of our entire island if, it gets fully operational. But you're going to start with, I think, like a small pilot type of thing. And I also see that you've been, fitting many government buildings and schools with solar power. You've also got a movement portal that encourages young people to actively participate in protecting and improving our environment. So obviously, when it comes to these sorts of things, it's not just the now. At some point, our generations will no longer, be here. So how important is progress, but also protecting our environment for future generations, and maybe speak to some of these programs that you're doing?
I mean, sustainability is always a difficult balance.
Yeah.
And so the perspective that I take on it, and the perspective the government approach to the situation, is that we laid out certain things that we said we would do when we were elected back in 2017, and we're continuing to follow up on those. So whether or not it is the work which we've done to increase protections for protected spaces, whether or not it's the work which we're doing with all of the persons that are involved in the oceans to develop a marine spatial plan that can identify how we're going to protect our exclusive economic zone, while also benefiting from that zone in a way that we haven't done, not just for current fishermen, but also to advance ourselves to a space of being a commercial fishing space and fisheries exporting, which I think is also important. And it's also about how do we better support our local domestic farmers to produce more of our food here locally and sustainability to assist. So earlier I'd spoken about, the Agricultural Development Center, which stores the food which is made. But on a balance of this, there is the whole issue of growth versus environmental protection. And I think the way in which we go about that is that you try not to encroach on green space. You build on brownfield sites, as they say, to do as much as possible. And that is a reason why we are, relaxing the height restrictions in Hamilton and making sure that we free more of that up so more persons can live and work in the city of Hamilton. From an environmental protection standpoint, I think that we have a relatively good record. A record that, of course, people get very upset because, planning will say you can't do this, you can't do that. Yeah. The environment community says, oh, you're going too close to parklands, etc. But I think there is that balance, and I think we're striking the right one. Some people, I think, would say, environmentalists will say that you're being too lenient, and persons who want development will say that you're being too strict.
Right.
That's the kind of balance that you want, because environmentalists won't be right all the time, and developers won't be right all the time either. And it's a thing that's always, how it settles inside of the middle. But from an environment perspective on a longer term, I think that we have to also recognize that Bermuda has been recognized for its leadership in the green economy and the development of the blue economy. The minister has won multiple awards for his advocacy for the projects in which we're doing here. When you talk about the electrification of the bus fleet, when you talk about the fact that which we are installing solar, when you talk about the fact that we're going to be pioneering new forms of energy on island and the aggressive targets that we have for net emissions in Bermuda, I think that we have a good story to tell. And the world has taken notice of what Bermuda has done in this aspect, reference what we've done. And some persons have even taken what we've done to transport them over to their jurisdiction. So I think history will show that the work and effort of which we're doing now will certainly benefit future generations, because we have to take care of what we have. We're not going to be as impacted by climate change as other lower lying jurisdictions, but there will be an impact. And that's why it's important that we show our leadership, so that, at a future stage when we can actually sit at the UN and talk and develop and speak on those issues, we say, we've done our part. Now it's time for the larger nations who are actually doing the most to contribute to the changing climate to also do their part.
All right, thank you, Premier. And as I began this conversation here at Fort Hamilton, a place that I feel like connects the entire island from this viewpoint. On a scale of 1 to 10, you've been Premier for 6 years now?
Just under 6, but close enough.
Scale of 1 to 10 for everybody that's watching, how optimistic are you as we go into the future?
Optimism for Bermuda's future?
Yeah.
10.
10?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Incredibly optimistic. And I say that from the perspective, I know the challenges that Bermuda is facing right now, but the challenges that Bermuda is facing are no different than the challenges which are being faced in every single country right now. And so from that perspective, you have to look at it from what do we have going for us and how can we get better? And the fact that we have capacity to grow in tourism, the fact that our international business is growing, the fact that we have more entrepreneurs, the fact that we are reducing taxes for entrepreneurs and workers, and the fact that we are, having more students educated at Bermuda College, all the rest, those are investments that will pay off in the future. They're beginning to reap their benefits now, and they will continue. So that is the optimism which I have, because I know the work of which we've done, and I see it bearing fruit on a daily basis. So I am incredibly, incredibly optimistic.